Okay, so let's get back into this here. I'm going to take apart the rear gearbox and clean it up and put it back together. I was looking at this earlier and I had something I thought I was going to say about it, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, right, so as far as I think assembling this is when I did the ZX-S Evo restoration and I was putting this back together. I had made some comment on, how the manual tells you to put everything together and how it's rather inconvenient because you have basically all of these pieces you got to hold together as you're screwing them in while putting two belts in and the diff pulley and these roller bearings down here and up here, and you need like 10 hands to do this. But a more intelligent way of doing it is, at least in part, as you get some of this together, for this roller here that goes on this pulley to the rear, or on this belt, sorry, to the rear diff pulley, you put it in from this side. You could put it in after all this is put together and just kind of like slot this thing in here, screw it down. That would certainly be easier than trying to like come in from the side while all this other stuff is being put together. Anyway, a minor point. For now, let's just get this thing taken apart. Now, as you can see, even with this rear gearbox taken apart, I can't just take the rear diff pulley out. Okay, it's not like the front gearbox where you just lift the assembly off of the top and then the diff pulley comes out. That's because this roller bearing right here is putting enough tension on the belt that you can't really wiggle this thing around to move it out. Now maybe I can slide this around a little bit and get the bearing out of, both bearings out of the little housing here, but even still, it's not easy. Oh, there we go. Maybe I can do that, and then just kind of pop this thing off, kind of, sort of. Let's see. Really what you should do is just take the halves apart, which I think is what I'll do because I don't want to overstress this belt or anything. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that. And let's see, how do I want to, you know what, I'll just use another one of these. Let's put these parts in here. So, let's see, we will start by doing, because you have screws that come in 3 from this side, and 1, 2, 3 from this side. So we're going to take this half off first. Okay. You're going to see why this is such a mess. So that's with this plate off, and then this can kind of come off. So here's the thing. Once this is on, when I put this plate back on, I got to insert each of these 3 sleeves here in between this plate and hold them in place one by one while threading this screw through. And that's just for these 3 parts right here. Okay, and by the way, if you're interested in knowing, these are how tall? 6, 7. These are 7 millimeters in height. Okay, and you need 6 of them. 3 on this side and another 3 on this side. And the standoffs in the middle here, these are, what is that? These are 22 millimeters right here, the ones in the middle. Okay. Alright, so let's just put those in. Now we got to get this off, and the thing is, this is where it gets fun. So you can't just pull this off. That's because you have this bearing here slot through this little housing, and it doesn't just slide out because on this side here you got this little guy that screws into this little guy that actually holds the bearing in place. So what you actually have to do is unscrew this bearing holder and then this whole thing will slide out. Now it's easy to unscrew. Now try to imagine what it's like when you're putting it together and you have to screw that in. Try to take this little freaking thing and hold it at exactly that hole and hold it in place while screwing this little screw in. Real pain in the ass. So this is why I had one of the reasons why I had mentioned when I was again working on the ZX-S Evo restoration that the rear gearbox on this is very difficult to assemble. I'll just put that there. But now that will come off like so. See, now this comes right off. Okay? And we have this little roller assembly here. Are those even bear? Oh yeah, they are bearings. They're just really dirty. Okay, so I will take this off. Are these aluminum screws? What is this? And you know what? I think that's an aluminum screw. But it's kind of interesting because this must be an aftermarket screw, because the manual doesn't show anything like that. Again, it's a ZX-S Evo manual. I couldn't find a ZX-S manual. Apparently they don't exist, at least not online. So the Evo one is as close as I can get to it, which is fine. They're mostly the same. That is the rear diff. So now we can actually start taking stuff out. Almost. So here, since now this lay shaft is just connected to this one side, it wobbles enough so that I can pull the belt out, the front belt out. This belt's actually in pretty good condition. I don't see any reason to change it. And it's funny about some of these belts is they don't actually tell you how many teeth there are. You can count them, and I can't remember the number on the previous video, but nonetheless, this belt is actually in good condition. So we're going to hang on to this. We're going to use this. And likewise for the rear belt, despite it being somewhat older, and maybe a little frayed on the side, it's actually not in bad condition. Okay, so let's see if I could get this belt out of here using the same little wiggliness. Okay, here we go. How does this belt look? That's also not bad. And yeah, I think I'll hang on to this one. No need to change it. It's in perfectly good condition. Again, this is for a shelfer. I don't plan to run this ZX-S. Alright, so now you can see how this a little more about why this is kind of a pain, because we have to get this plate off, and that's held in place by these 3 screws here on the motor plate, but we can't get to that without removing the slipper clutch assembly. Okay, so we're going to do that. So a lot of these pieces here are kind of interdependent on each other. In terms of what you have to remove in order to remove other stuff. And again, that just makes it harder to service this chassis compared to the older lasers. So now that we have that slipper hub off, right, this is a hyper clutch. You can tell it's a hyper clutch because you have this little notch in here on the inside slipper hub, and it mates to this. This is actually an aluminum attachment to the lay shaft, but this doesn't slide out. Why is that? Because you have another bearing holder over here holding in this bearing. Okay, so this is just going to hang in there for the moment while I remove these 3 screws. Okay, because I have to remove this whole motor plate to get to the screw that's on the other side of this bearing holder to remove this lay shaft. Totally not a pain in the ass at all. And both screws on either side that connect to this, they go through this guy and then they go into this guy. So they both each slot into this centerpiece here. Okay? So that means we're going to take off this as well as that. I'm going to do that 2 more times. Okay, that comes out, and another one. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Now we have this piece here. So there's this piece that mounts this roller bearing that goes across to the other side for the center front pulley. Alright, and we gotta take that off. We gotta take off this little screw here to take off that bearing holder. So we'll do that first, so I can at least put this back onto the lay shaft here. Of course, this screw, I don't want to strip the screw. Ugh. That's the other thing, because this is a circular part. You can't just hold this in with, like, you know, a hex nut or anything. So you got to use, you know, your finger to kind of hold this down and put enough pressure on this so you can start to unscrew this from this side. And it looks like it's on there pretty tight. You can see that moving around. I don't want to destroy this thing. God damn it. Alright, so here, let me actually just take this off first. Alright, that one is unscrewing, which is good. So that's coming off. And by the way, these two little bearing holders are the exact same size that go on either side of the gearbox housing. And you have two 3x6mm bearings here. This section here is how long? That is 12mm long here. And these are 3x6 by I think 2.5. So 2 times that should be 5. Yes, these are 3x6 by 2.5 here. And then these go onto a little 3mm shaft inside here with an E-clip. Okay, this part is basically impossible to find if you want the original part. But if you have just a screw that's, let's say, that alone gets you to 20, plus you have to account for the, I presume that's 3mm of carbon fiber. That's actually 2. So you're looking at 22. Yeah, so if you have like a 3x22 screw, and then you could put 12mm of spacers in here, and then 2 3x6 bearings. Maybe you need like a 3x24 or 25 to give yourself just enough margin to put a little lock nut on there. But the problem is, if you put the lock nut on there, what's going to happen? Well, that's going to interfere. Well, on this side, it's maybe not a big deal. You don't want that lock nut to end up interfering with any of the belts. But if it's going in here, out on this side, it's not going to really touch anything. And the other one coming this way should, yeah, okay, I guess that should be fine. I can't quite remember how I did it on the ZX-S Evo. So now my main problem is actually getting this thing, getting a hard enough grip on this thing without destroying it, because it's an aluminum piece, so that I can unscrew this without also stripping this screw head. As you can tell, that screw head is slightly worn. Oh, there we go. I think I got it. Okay. This little guy is what, like a 2mm thread. That's how deep. It's like a 2x4 or something like that. And I don't know exactly what to use as a substitute for this, because this is threaded on the inside. So, you know, and again, like, this is sort of a Kyosho part. Very hard to find replacements for that. So maybe there's some funky little setup with something. I'd have to think about, like, if I were to, you know, to build another ZX-S from parts, and I had to get sort of creative with having a bearing holder that I could put on either side of this gearbox housing. I'd have to think about what I would use as a substitute for this piece, because I don't have any extras of that. So that would be a tricky one. And as you can see, essentially, last out, first in. So when we put this all back together, this will actually be the first in, and then the bearing holder will go in, and then we kind of put everything back together more or less in the order that we took it apart in. So let me just put this back together. Okay, and then this part of the hub here connects with a grub screw on one side. This center pulley here that drives the rear diff pulley, that's locked, okay, but this one here has a one-way, and on the ZXR, the ZXRR, and even the ZX, it also had a one-way pulley, but the threading here, this also has a threaded lay shaft on this side. It was set up in such a way that you had a friction plate that could rub up against this pulley here. But the way this is set up is that this little plastic block here actually mates to this outer bearing. So if you're going to crank down on anything, it's just going to be this cranking down on this bearing. And it's not going to do anything to add friction to this one-way pulley here. And that's because of the fact that these are, you know, carbon fiber gearbox housings. Okay, they're sort of plates on either side. A little different from the, you know, old ZX and ZXR molded gearbox housing, where you can have a different bearing setup. Again, I can't quite remember exactly how that worked. It's been a while. But essentially, it was a different setup that allowed you to tighten down on the nut that would go onto this side of the threaded lay shaft and actually tighten down a friction plate against this pulley here. So you don't really have that here. Okay, this one way is sort of, there are ways around it, and again, if you go back and look at my ZX-S Evo build, you'll see what I did there. It's been a while, so I can't fully remember what I did there. So this is actually in decent shape. There's really nothing to clean here. And if anything, so I was thinking about maybe, do I want to clean these plates? But how exactly would I clean them? I don't think I really need to clean the plates. So what I'll do is I'll just clean the, well, yeah, it's a little dirty. Okay, so maybe I can use some turtle wax on that. That definitely needs some cleaning too. And I also got to clean these little aluminum posts here. Okay. So let's see, where are my sock rag? Always gotta love the sock rag. Got plenty of those. And we're gonna go over here. Turtle wax, bug and tar remover. I use this a lot for cleaning up, like double-sided tape goop off of, you know, chassis that I don't want to scratch up. Works really well for that. It's also pretty good for just cleaning up carbon fiber and giving it a decent finish. So let's see, which one of these do I want to use? Yeah, right. I guess I'll use this one. So normally the way you use this is if it's like, if this has a gunky surface on it because there's double-sided tape residue, you just spray it, you let it sit for a few minutes, and you start wiping, and it comes right off. But here we're just going to use this to kind of clean up these carbon plates here. And what's good about that stuff is it gives it like a nice sort of wax finish. I don't know if it's wax or polish or something, but it looks nice. A little cleaner when you're done with it. So, as long as there's no streaking. Alright, that's a little better. So let's see if that made a difference. You can see this is before cleaning, this is after, and there's a little bit of an extra shine on this side, right? This is a little more dull. So it does look, you know, provably a little better. So we're just going to do that on these other carbon parts here. Just to make it look halfway decent. It's just one or two little spritzes from the sprayer. It really doesn't take much. You can get quite a lot of use out of it. Alright. That one looks better. And then the last piece here. Okay, that was this thing. This really needs a simple green, I think. Clean this. That's just scuffed. I don't think that's really something you can clean, because that's just abrasion that's really been beating up that aluminum there. So, okay, fine, whatever. At this point I'm just using whatever's left to just pick up any dirt that might be on this surface. Okay, so put that aside. This I will close it off. Leave it there, I suppose. Alright, so I'm going to put these here. And before I put the gearbox back together, so there's a few things I got to do. I got to clean these aluminum bits, and I got to rebuild the diffs. I might as well do both of them if I'm going to do one of them. So let me put this. Alright, so let's get all the aluminum bits first. All out of here. Now, I'm guessing you guys are not going to want to see me go through each of these little pieces and clean them off bit by bit. That's just sort of, you know, an elbow grease process. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually clean these off camera so that when I do the next video, you know, these will be ready, or at least cleaner. Alright, so actually I'm going to set these aside for now, and so for the next video those will be ready, or at least that's the plan. So what I'll do instead is rebuild the diffs. Okay, so these are going to be using, see, some diffs use a Phillips screw head for the thrust bolt. Other diffs use a hex head. Oh right, this has a little felt tip thing in it. Look at all that muck. Oh, that's actually I know what that is. That's not even grease. That is the old little piece of felt that you would normally put in there to protect the thrust bolt. So the way the Kyosho bearings, or Kyosho ball diffs work, is you have a thrust bolt that goes on this side that houses the thrust bearing, and then there's a little sort of felt circular thing that you just slot into the diff out drive to keep the dirt from getting onto that thrust bearing. This has been this has been around for what, like 20 years or something, and so that felt just turned into dust. That's what you see right here. That's essentially what that is. Wonderful. Let's see. Is it a Phillips? It is. Okay, so this thrust bolt actually uses a Phillips screw. Alright. So what we're going to do, let's see, I'm also going to want to, you know what, I'll just take this one. What a nice, clean surface for cleaning the diff balls and putting on the diff grease. And let's see, we're going to take this here. You know what, no, it's fine. I'll actually just use the other one. Alright. So here we go. Let's see, do I want to do it this way? So I want to set this up in a way so that the diff balls don't just roll off the table or anything. Okay, where are we? There we are. Now these diffs actually feel pretty good, but I'd have to imagine that they're a little dry, because who knows when was the last time this car was actually used or serviced. Alright, this car is kind of old. So, yeah, you see that? That diff plate's pretty dry. Those diff balls are dry as a bone. So we're just going to clean it up and rebuild it. Alright. And this plate here is like a pressure plate. You gotta press it on. See, there's a bevel there and a bevel here, and it presses in. It's just like the other, well, it is a conventional laser diff. Okay, so we're going to clean this. I don't really spray ball bearings with motor spray. I know a lot of people tend to do that when they're cleaning bearings. All I do is I just kind of check with my pinky like this, see if it spins freely. If it's decent, then I'll reuse it. And I just use bearing lube to just, you know, re-oil it, and that's it. If it starts to feel chunky, I don't throw it out, I just put it in a box with all the other chunky used bearings, and you know, maybe one day I'll just get back to restoring them. But this one's not bad. So all you got to do, a couple drops, flip it over, a couple drops. Alright, I'm going to put that to one side over here. And I guess if we're being completely facetious, we will actually clean out the out drives. Let's do that. I am going to need, I had some Q-tips here. Here we go. Q-tips. These are really good for getting into diff out drives. Alright. Just take this. Just clean it up. I do the same thing with also like old shock bodies. If you're trying to clean up and restore really old shocks, like old associated shocks, for example. Same thing, Q-tip, get in there, clean all the dirt out. Does the trick. No problem. This really doesn't have anything on it. Although this side has something, and why is, oh, I see, there's the diff plate. That makes sense. Alright, so what we can do now is put this back together like so. And you see it doesn't actually lock in place. That only happens when you tighten the whole thing down. And the diff plate is actually right here. Kind of got stuck on the other side of the pulley. Let's see how this thing's doing. So, what are we going to do? This is the same diff plate that you use, I think, even on the modern lasers. WBD5. So let's see. That's the back side. There's no grooving. There's a very little amount of grooving on the front side. So yeah, it looks like the previous owner didn't run this a whole lot. But I like the disc to be, if we're going to rebuild this and go through the trouble, I'm going to flip this over and use the non-grooved side for the rebuild. So I'm just going to place that there. We'll do the actual diff grease a little later. This is for the other side. Alright, clean this off. And see, a little bit of a ring there. Slight grooving. You could still reuse that if you want. And here, clean enough. Okay, so then, let's see, what do I want to do? Do I want to take this out first? Yeah, let's take this out first. And clean this up a little bit. Do the thrust bearing in a moment. And if there's a little bit of dirt in the little grooves there in the bearing, just get a little brush and just brush it out. You don't even need carcinogenic motor spray to do this. You just got to take some time. Well, in this case, that's just kind of caked in there, so you can probably go in there with a little hobby knife. See, just scrape all that stuff out. Look at that, gunky. Comes right out. So the only thing you really need the motor spray for is if there's dirt inside the bearing. And use that to help get as much of it out as possible. Two, three. 1, 2, 3. Okay. This guy, wow. So that's actually clean on the inside. This red marking here is, I presume, part of the original build. Although I've never seen that before, so I don't know why that's red. Ah! And there are 2 shims. Okay. Didn't even realize that. Those were really stuck onto the this little guy. So, I'm going to put this back. Actually, not yet. That's going to go there. Now, take the thrust bearing out. Let's see, there's a few ways we can do this. Let's take this. Pokey, pokey, pokey. There's the thrust bearing. Let's take a look. That's actually not bad, I'll be honest. Alright, let's clean this up. Okay, so let's see, let me put this in first. And this, I believe the shims were on this side. And we'll put this guy on. Okay. Now, the thrust bearing I'm going to do last. because you get it all greased up and you don't want to let it sit somewhere. So you want to clean it, grease it up, and then put it in as you're assembling the diff. So what we're going to do next is this. Now, different people may have different preferences for how to clean up grimy ball diffs. If you really want to do this right, you know, because you're like trying to restore a diff pulley, you would get an ultrasonic cleaner and some cleaning solution, simple green or something else, and you put it in the ultrasonic bath for a while and try to shake off all the teeny tiny little dirt particles that are in there. But I don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, and so I kind of have to do it the hard way. I'm just trying to scrape out the dirt as much as I can, and you know, use a brush or something to just try to brush off the rest of the gunk, and that's kind of it. Sometimes I take the diff balls out and try to clean inside there. Other times I don't, depending on my mood, quite frankly. Because if you take the diff balls out and you start cleaning with a Q-tip or something, you're also going to end up pushing some dirt inside those housings, and that doesn't necessarily help you. So I'll use the clean heads here. There's a little bit left in there, but it's really not a big deal. Let's see, there are... Yeah, okay. Now, this is asymmetric. You see these little slots here, and there's no slots here. And I actually forgot which way I had it going, so I'm just going to check the manual to see which side gets diff housing with the thrust bearing. So, alright, the thrust bearing gets the side that doesn't have a little snappy ring. Fair enough. Which is this side right here. So, the slotted side is what the thrust bearing side is going to go into. Okay, great. Let me flip this over now. And I also have to get the actual grease. Let's see. Ball diff grease. High durability ball diff grease. Let's use the normal stuff. And I do also have drive joint grease right here. Okay. So we're going to start with ball diff grease. And what I'm going to do is clean this off. You know what? I could even use, instead of this, use this. I do that as well. Alright, so first things first is getting some of it onto this plate here, just to help that diff plate kind of stick to this thing. Alright, so we're going to take the groove side and put it on like so. And then put a little bit on the plate itself. Alright. That's going to sit up. And that side's going to go in here. So now, goof this up a little bit. we're actually going to do is both sides. I'm just going to put this thing on there, and I don't want to have to do this side while it's sitting on that. It'll just get a little too fiddly, so I'll just do it all at once. Like so. A little more. Boop. Okay. So this, let me go here, like so. Okay, so we're just going to have that sit there. We're going to take this, flip it over. First we have to put a little bit of grease on this. See? Let me take the groove side of this guy, plop that down, and then we're going to grease this up a little bit. So maybe a bit too much. Alright, let's see. Alright, it's not too bad. Okay, so now this is going to go in like so. Okay, so just pressing them together, you can feel it feels totally fine, not crunchy at all. Alright, so we're done with this diff. Next is this. So what do we do?